Now, this is quite an important question. In fact, we have been for ages taught that the AMH level remains constant, that you can measure it at any time of the cycle and you'll get a similar value. Have a look at this again and have a look at your clinical practice, and there'll be cases in which you see an AMH fluctuation that tends to occur. AMH levels changing and changing by significant numbers. And you think, well, it's the lab problem probably, and probably that is something which you will have to have a think about. But the question is does the AMH fluctuate? And that is something which is quite important. So this is a study which was looked at, and they looked at they in fact looked at their own study of in a natural cycle, looking at AMH variations. So let's look at this way. What is AMH? It's produced by the granular cells of the preantral and antral follicles. It displays individual variability. And in fact, AMH will vary according to the antral follicles in different people. So you may see somebody at 35-year-old who has got a variable antral follicle, and there the AMH may vary. Where does the AMH also vary? The AMH also varies and in fact gets suppressed by hormonal contraception, pregnancy, body mass index, a high body mass index, smoking, and when you stimulated gonadotrophins, the AMH starts dropping. And while generally it's considered to be a reliable marker, there have been some recent publications which have looked at AMH being higher in some cases in the follicular phase. Young women may have fluctuation of AMH that is different from older women. And there could be circadian variations of AMH too, and this is what has been seen. So they looked at 22 volunteers between 18 and 38, regular menstrual cycles, normal BMI without any challenges. And they did a blood test between day 2 and 3, day 10, day of LH rise, mid-luteal, and again in the subsequent cycle on day 2 or day 3. And there were significant longitudinal fluctuations in AMH levels per participant in the range of a coefficient of 20%. Day 2 and 3 consecutive samples also showed a change of between 0.75 nanogram per ml, and the intracycle variation was 0.25. And there seems to be a 28% variation between day 2 and day 3 in subsequent cycles. It was done with the same laboratory, same tool. There have been studies which have looked at AMH rise, which has happened with also with LH rise. And probably because there is a joint regulatory mechanism that works on LH rise and AMH regulation. And so this is, in fact, becomes quite an interesting concept. Now, if again this study looked at and said, well, the difference seems to be close to 20%, it may reflect, and that's my belief, and it may be challenged or wrong, and I'd say, see, whenever you see a better antral follicle count, it will be accompanied by a better AMH, and women's antral follicle count changes month after month. And this also will explain to us why women respond differently in stimulation cycles. So sometimes they produce 4 eggs, and the same woman will produce 7 or 8 oocytes. Most important, ovarian reserve does not vary, and but AMH does. So you are not measuring all the ovarian reserve by measuring AMH, and probably it's not an easy molecule to quantify. So what is my take on this? And I'll say, have a look at your AMH. It doesn't make sense measuring AMH repeatedly. But if you have someone with a variable antral follicle count, then stimulate when the follicle count is much better. And that probably makes that difference. Also remember that you can only stimulate what you see. If you can, at the start of stimulation, see 8 follicles, try what you may, unless you're wrong, you cannot see more than 5 developing follicles, but that is a rarity. On an average, the FORT is usually tends to be between 50 and 70%. So you're more likely to see, if you have 8 follicles, about between 5 and 6 follicles growing up to egg collection.